Democrats enjoyed that sunshine at the Illinois State Fair, but there was still that cloud of Mike Madigan's corruption that federal prosecutors allege, and I had to ask Democrats about that ongoing prosecution, where earlier this year you had the ComEd 4 found guilty. That was a former utility executive, 3 lobbyists, including a close confidant of Michael Madigan, being Michael McLean. So they were found guilty earlier this year. Tim Mapes, Madigan's former chief of staff and House clerk, faces trial today and ongoing throughout the rest of the week, where evidence is being provided. And Madigan, he faces trial for what prosecutors called Madigan Enterprise, a nearly decade-long bribery scheme to curry favor from the legislature in exchange for little-to-do-nothing jobs for Madigan associates. Obviously, Madigan's pleaded not guilty. He faces trial next year. But all of this, a cloud over the Democrats' messaging, and had to get those questions in. But before we hear the response about that cloud, what's going on with the Mapes trial? Well, it's ongoing, and if you check out the Chicago Tribune, they've compiled all of the evidence that's been presented so far to the jury, including audio evidence. And you can actually go and click through and hear some of this, including a conversation that Mapes had with Mike McLean that deals with some stuff happening here in Springfield. And in particular, a conversation that McLean worried was being recorded during a phone call that he shared concerning a Chinatown land deal. But he reflected on something that happened here in Springfield.
No. I'm kind of worked up about this.
Well, I don't. He got more worked up after your phone call, not because of you, but because of Andrew.
Right.
And I didn't get much on the Andrew thing in my other call, but I got more on other things, and he got focused on Andrew, and so he got anxious to get back to the apartment. But we were here at Alexander's. Jody comes up and says that a couple tables away was Frank Ortiz and someone else, and they thought they were taping our conversation.
Really?
So he got quiet.
So obviously, some of the concerns there about conversations being taped, but that tape was rolling on that conversation. And some of the other evidence includes a conference call with Madigan and a bunch of his lieutenants, and he was sharing some of his thoughts.
And those that did not want to use.
But it sounds like to me this is not going to be like a quick story.
Next to that, I was driving to Springfield, and Tim called to tell me that Bustos wanted to talk to me, and I talked to Bustos, and Bustos told me she was sending through a letter where these three were going to declare their independence and proclaim that they would do independent fundraising to pay for what they were going to do. And that it was really absolutely critical to what they planned to do, that there be independence from me. And right about this time, why the panel took the view that they were only going to communicate to me in writing.
So, again, this was back in 2018 when Madigan had this conference call, and that was during the peak of the #MeToo movement. So if you get a chance, there's tons of evidence there. You could spend all day just listening and reading the transcripts and whatnot. But what's the reaction from Democrats? Now, granted, we didn't necessarily hear anything bombshell, and there's tons of evidence there, but it just highlights the prosecutors have the goods. They have the recordings. They presented a bunch during the ComEd 4 trial. They're presenting even more here at the Tim Mapes trial, and I imagine we're going to hear a lot more in the trial with Mike Madigan next year. So what lessons have Democrats learned? I asked that question. We'll get some answers. So Democrats gathering at the state fair today. Democrats gathered yesterday. Republicans gather today. But as Democrats gathered under sunny skies, you had that cloud of corruption with the ongoing prosecution of Tim Mapes, the guilty verdicts of the ComEd 4, and Mike Madigan facing trial next year. Madigan wasn't just the longest-serving state house speaker. in history. He was also in charge of the Democratic Party of Illinois from 1998 all the way up until 2021 when he stepped down after leaving the State House. Shortly after that, he was charged with 22 counts of corruption. So what do some of the Democrats have to say? What lessons have they learned? I found State Representative Jay Hoffman. He is the Assistant House Majority Leader, and I asked him about what lessons Democrats have learned from all of this.
Well, I mean, I personally haven't followed it that closely. I do know that there have been certain allegations, and we'll just let the courts determine the course of action.
And as far as anything that the State House can do to shore up ethics, I know that they triggered laws that allegedly they violated, and they're facing that. Is there anything that the State House can do to get ahead of that, to keep like an 8-year-long or a 9-year-long bribery allegation from going on as long as it did?
Well, first of all, bribery is illegal. It's always been illegal. It'll continue to be illegal. We passed substantial ethics reforms recently, and let's just let them be put into effect, and let's see how they work out.
But some of those reforms not going nearly far enough. You've got Republicans saying that Madigan's House rules are still very much in place, allowing for a focus on raising up special interests concerns over the concerns of the people of Illinois. And that's true. There's a lot of the Madigan rules still in place. Republicans and the superminority can't advance legislation, even if they get bipartisan support, unless the Speaker allows for it to move forward with the Rules Committee that is dominated by Democrats. So obviously there's still a lot of questions as to how exactly the House rules play with all of this. You had Senator Dick Durbin having to answer some of the questions as well as to Madigan. And is there still that cloud overhead? And what lessons have Democrats learned?
We've moved to a new generation of leadership in the House of Representatives here in Springfield. A great leader, and with the governor and the president of the Senate, they're doing extraordinary things for our state. That's an important chapter in our history, but it is history.
So I also asked others, including Alexi Janulius, the Secretary of State, about what lessons Madigan corruption saga should be taken from Democrats. Are they learning anything?
I will tell you from within our office and being in Springfield, we don't talk about Mike Madigan. Doesn't really come up. I'm focused on what we've been able to do. And as all of you know very well, Mike Madigan was never a fan of mine. Did everything he could to make sure I never got into office. So I'm proud of the leadership we have in place. We have a great leader in the Illinois Senate and the House, and an amazing governor.
But are there any lessons to be learned that you think the Democrats should pick up?
Yeah, I think people are sick and tired of scandal, corruption, so anything we can do to increase transparency and let people know exactly what happens at every level is important. We're doing that on our side with lobbyist registration. We want to do everything we can to increase transparency from the Secretary of State's vantage point.
So, again, just some of the elected Democrats reacting to that question of what lessons should be learned. I tried talking with House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch, but he simply said no interviews. A couple of different times I tried to talk to him at the fairgrounds, but nothing. Let's take a quick call here. You've got less than a minute. Good morning.
Greg, you can't come to the fair and say no interviews. That's ridiculous. Come on, man. Welch. Hey, the guy that said bribery is illegal, so essentially he's saying we already have laws in the books. Man, if they only took that approach when it came to gun legislation. Thanks, Greg.
Appreciate the call. Yeah, and that's kind of the go-to. That's kind of the go-to comment that Democrats have is, listen, these guys are being caught breaking the law. They're already being found out to break the law, but Republicans have been pushing for things to allow for more independence with the Inspector General so that they can actually get to the root of these things before federal prosecutors have to come in and arrest people. There's a whole host of reforms that Republicans have been pushing for, but really haven't seen advance at the Illinois State House. All right, that's all I got for you this hour. Of course, the Republicans, they rally today, so they'll have their chance. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about Madigan and wokeism.
From the Fly STI Studios, take the easy way up.